Hey, what's going on, Barroom? It's Cars here for this week's Cars Keys to the Game for Week 9 against Philly. After last week's rants and ravings of what felt like a lunatic, and I guess that's what this season has done to me, as well as a host of others, um, I'm going to talk quite a bit more, at least statistically, about what I need to see this week in a very winnable game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Make no mistake, this is not going to be some demon hunting game, right? To quell the demons of the double doink or anything like this. But this is, I said it last week, and it really continues to this week, that this is a season defining game, and whether they build momentum or lose it. And candidly, I think that they have lost it after San Diego, but after after LA, I still will never get that right. Um, but after hearing Coach Nagy today and through the week about everybody believing and um, hearing little things like Mitch watching himself and not realizing he's not having fun, I will say that it does seem like the Bears weren't having fun this year or haven't. The increased expectation has set them on a more serious tone. They've obviously not been able to keep up with that. Um, but we'll get through to that as this takes. But I really feel like you know last week I thought that'd be make or break. It doesn't seem like it's broke the team, and I think that heavily does go to Coach Nagy and how he keeps everybody together and how he keeps the locker room together. But this week, is that. I like that statement that all we can control is going 1-0. I know all this stuff is cliche, but it does seem like on the whole the team is buying it or buying into it. So, with that, what I want to do is just get started into the three keys to the game. This isn't going to be a Mitch rant. Um, I definitely want to go into a Mitch rant. I want to go into an offense rant. I shared some tweets yesterday, right, on pictures of everybody complaining about the play calling inside the red zone, and yes, there are always some question marks. But if you look at any game, I showed three examples, one of them by the god awful Jets, of them running similar concepts, similar plays, out executing what the Bears did, and actually scoring on them without running, right? And that's always the important part of this. You know, before I go into the keys, I guess I will go on a mini rant here. You know, 2 years ago, Bears fans on the whole got pissed off that Mitch Trubisky threw 8 passes in a game that we won, because that's not how the modern NFL is played, right? That's not the way that teams should be here, and we need an offensive-minded head coach. And now, now that we found all these flaws in Mitch, now everyone's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe we should only have him throw 10, 12 times a game and just run the rest of the time. And that's not real, right? There are teams that you're going to be able to run against. There are teams that you're going to be able to hit plays against. But that just doesn't mean that you give up. For the growth of this team, for the growth of this as a potential Super Bowl team that we thought that they could all go, you can't be just a run-focused team. As much as I love what Lamar Jackson in Baltimore is doing right now, and maybe I'm going to eat crow on this, but that's not something that really carries over through into the Super Bowl. We saw he's way more accurate. Please don't get me wrong, but he's way more accurate than Jesus was for Denver, and we all know who I'm talking about. But that type of offense in the playoffs is a different situation. And so you need to be able to pass the ball. And while, yes, I would have liked to see a run or two from inside the red zone, I didn't have a problem with those because there was a slant to Allen Robinson that he threw awfully that would have been a touchdown. There's another play that he threw to Adam Sheen. The actual guy was Trey Burton right in the middle of the field. That would have been a touchdown. Like, don't sit down you can't play this dual sided. You can't sit down and say, well, Nagy's the problem because he's putting all this pressure on Mitch. The reason that Matt kept coming out and saying, the plays are there, we just need to execute, is because the plays are there and they just need to execute. I'm sorry, you could sit down and complain all you want, but guess what? I bet you they wouldn't have scored if they were running the ball either because they were not executing on the line anywhere. There were plays to be made. The team missed them. That's not all on Mitch. There are execution problems, but when there are plays to be made, he's missed them. And frankly, it's a conversation I'm tired of having. There are two camps right now. There are basically the anti-Mitch, or it's the all Mitch's fault, or there's the Nagy fault, right? You're going to pretty much fall into one or two categories. And I'm not going to be able to convince you one way or another that it's there. I've seen all these video cut-ups, usually those that are like me that are thinking that Mitch is the bigger part of the problem. I'm going to show you everything, all the bad plays, right? And then there's going to be the other guys that are like, see, Mitch did all of this good stuff, and look at this throw, and look at that throw. He put us in a position to win the game. This is not on him. It is never that cut and dry, right? Life is in the grays, and that's what this is. So that's the end of my rant. Let's get into some of the numbers. You know, it's going to start off with me for the Bears defense and controlling the run. And we know that this has been a problem so far this season. And even though they played really well last week against a team that isn't running the ball very well, they still gave up an inexcusable 19-yard touchdown to Melvin Gordon. So stopping the run is going to be extremely important for us. The reason I say that is, ironically, if you look at Philadelphia, this is a team that's kind of been struggling to pass the ball. So they've gone more heavy in the run recently and started to emphasize more of the run to cover some inconsistent QB play and a lack of playmakers in the wide receiver group, right? Now, some of the increase in the run game is also intentional to cover up for a defense that's given up almost 350 yards a game, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But there's really some, this is a team that feels that it's just as important for them as it is for us, right? That's what's going to make this game so fascinating is if the Bears win, they could build momentum and go to a playoff game. But if they lose, I think they're pretty much done. That's going to hold true for Philly, even though the East isn't as strong of a division. Obviously, it's just Dallas and everybody else. At this point, and Dallas isn't even that good. The locker room issues, surprisingly in shock that Alshon Jeffrey is in the middle of it. There's a lot of spotlights in this team right now. Now, while this team kind of follows the Pittsburgh mentality of start a little slow, at least under Peterson, and build momentum and get quite hot at the right point in times, we don't want to be the point in time that they figure it out. Now, the reason I say with start controlling the run is Wentz really isn't the guy he was before both of those injuries. He's very inconsistent. Now, he has the ability to just go on hot streaks, right? It's almost like he will sit down and flick a switch, and all of a sudden, this guy that has been god-awful or brutal for stretches starts to figure it out. Now, he's been let down a lot by his wide receivers, and that does include, an Alshon Jeffrey, who is, again, sitting at around like a 63% catch percentage. Now, what's interesting about him as always is that, Alshon is a 50-50 jump ball guy, and he always will catch those, but it's like the 100% balls that he misses, right? He laps in concentration. We've seen that with Goddard a little bit. Ertz is always reliable, but he's not as popular as he was a couple of years ago for them. Nelson Aguilar hasn't been, exactly what they've ever hoped it would be. I don't know if Deshaun Jackson is going to play or not, but right, we saw Early on, they were looking like they were clicking because of just Deshaun as a vertical threat. Now everybody's really more of a conservative receiver who's not really going to do the deep threats. Alshon is really not that deep threat guy anymore. And so you take all of that away if you stop the run game. Now they've had it increased, focused in that run, right? And so we saw them actually go for over 200 yards against the Bills. They actually went against for 176 against Green Bay, and that was a team that we couldn't run the ball at well. But in recent weeks, right, it was 102 against Minnesota. It was like 125 against Dallas, and then 200 against a Bills team. And all three of those defenses are extremely good against the run. And most of this, unsurprisingly, is coming from the right side. With Dillard at the left side, that's definitely a hole for our pass rush and our defense to hit. But that right side is still Kelsey Brooks and Lane Johnson, and they're dominant. Brooks especially. I mean, that guy is just a prototype guard for his size and his mauling ability. And it's already a tough matchup if we've got Akeem Hicks. But we don't, right? So Akeem's going to be out in this week. So to cover this, right, this is going to have to be one of those games where we see guys like a Bilal Nichols, like a Nick Williams. These are going to be guys that are going to have to prevent Brooks from going and Kelsey from getting to that second level. They need to keep Trevathan clean. They need to keep Roquan clean. Because what do we know about their running back, Jordan Howard, who, by the way, 23 carries was the first time last week, which was the first time he's had 20 all season. But those are guys who make plays in space, and Jordan Howard isn't very good in space. So to control the run, you have to keep your inside linebackers clean. You have to prevent those guys they're very good at pulling Kelsey. They're very good at pulling and trapping with Brooks. They like to get those guys out to the second level and out in space, but with Miles Sanders most likely not playing, that's what they're going to be trying to do for Jordan. And so if we can keep our inside linebackers clean and they don't have that deep home run threat with Miles anymore, that's going to be a big point of focus. Now, again, we played very well against a bad rushing team last week, but this needs to be a point, right? So we struggled for 2 weeks in a row against the run game, but everything now is about building momentum, building positivity, and that's going to have to start with a team that's trying to establish the run. If we could start to do that now, there is still hope for the season, as negative as I was last week. The second key, not surprising, making a recurring theme for, the last 7 games, is this whole idea of a vertical passing game. I know, it's crazy talk. Everything I keep saying is we're an I formation town that needs to pound the rock. We need to be running. Chicago's a running town, even though this dominant run game that we all seem to think we've had since the Walter Payton era has netted us 1 Super Bowl victory and 2 Super Bowl appearances in my lifetime of 41 years. So we need to change this. And I get, right, that we're going to need to do some stuff for Mitch, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But the reason that this is so important is while Philly has looked good against teams like the Jets and the Buffalo Bills, 2 offenses that are archaic at best, god-awful with really bad to inconsistent QB play like us, this defense also gave 370 yards in the air against Washington, 414 against Green Bay, 310 for Atlanta, 325 for Minnesota. The only game that I would call a positive for them was against Detroit, where they only gave up 201. But I always asterisk Detroit because it's like, if it's not Jim Bob Cooter, which still remains the best name in coaching in the NFL, it's Darrell Bevell. Right? And so these guys are just not the sharpest tacks out there, but I digress. Now they're a little bit more hopeful because this guy by the name of Avante Maddox is coming up, but as we remember, he was brutally abused by A-Rob last year, especially in that fourth quarter. It should have been all game long, but I'm not going to go back and go over that. But if you watched anything of that Green Bay game, Devontae Adams put on a clinic against that guy and made him just look like a total chump. So if that's their best hope is that Avante Maddox is coming up, it's not a lot to hang their hopes on. And on the interior, right, they've got Fletcher Cox, who still remains their most dominant pass rusher and disruptive force. With 3.5 sacks this year, second on the team to Brandon Graham's 5.5. It's still more driven by what Fletcher can do, right? And he's in that dangerous position of being an inside guy, right? Nothing kills an offensive flow more than quick pass rush from the interior. This is a game I candidly wish that Kyle Long was here for and healthy for, but we've obviously moved on from that. So, Coward, Daniels, Whitehair. While Whitehair has stepped up and Coward has been pretty decent, Daniels is not. He's been kind of all over the place. But this is a game for them to step up to help give that protection for Mitch. When you kind of bundle this all together, this is a passing defense that on the season has already given up 8 40-plus yard passing plays on the season. That's third most in the NFL behind, shockingly, Green Bay and the New York Giants. Right? This is a team that's also given up 24 20-plus yard pass plays. So if you look at it, right, they've played 8 games. They're basically giving 3 plays greater than 20 yards and 1 play greater than 40 yards in the air on a game-by-game basis. Right? Outside of Malcolm Jenkins, there's just not a whole lot there for that defense. So again, you have to push them vertically. This is just going to be a recurring theme. This can't be check down Mitch. They have to go. We also know, right, that Maddox is a total sucker for double moves, right? While a somewhat solid corner, he starts to read and make guesses. And so if he's reading post, and all of a sudden you counter that and head back out to the sideline or hit him with a double move, he's gonna fall for that. We saw that in the playoffs. His aggressiveness is when he starts to think, all right, this guy's run slants the last 3 times. This is gonna be a slant, and boom, that's when you have to hit him with a double move. What Philly is most likely going to do is what everybody has done against us. They're going to drop Malcolm Jenkins into the box, which means that this is another good game to forget about Tariq Cohen. As much as I love Tariq in certain instances, right? We saw how ineffective he was against Philly in that situation without tight end help, and we don't have a tight end. But they're going to drop Malcolm into the box, and they're going to leave their other safeties out deep, right? And what they're going to try to do is that deep guy is going to shadow or usually kind of leverage over to the A-Rob side. This means that this is going to be, please forgive me because I know that I've called this out like almost every week, but this is going to have to be an Anthony Miller game as well. There are going to be plays to be there that are going to be in the passing game. They're going to be there vertically. Which brings me to Mitch. Mitch is still not seeing the field all the time. And his mechanics, as we have seen ad nauseum, are absolute crap. What we need to do in this game is get Mitch under center more often, into the play action. There does need to be some I formation. There needs to be less RPOs. But what we also need to do is get him on some rollouts, on some bootlegs. We need to get him out into space. The reason for that is, A, if we kind of roll him out, we're taking away half the field because we don't want him to necessarily, If he's rolling out right, I don't want him throwing across his body to the left-hand side, right? But in doing so, we're going to take away some of his initial reads. And if we do that on a play, like let's say we have him roll out to the right and Allen Robinson, who he locks onto all the time, is sitting left, it's going to force him to look at some of these other guys. You saw Gabriel was open quite a few times last week. I've been complaining, and I even complained 2 minutes ago about the tight end play. Trey Burton has been open the last 2 weeks. I've documented several plays where Trey Burton is there and Mitch isn't finding him. So now what you have to do is run plays to take Mitch's eyes where you want them to be. If that's a rollout, if that's a bootleg, if that's anything that you want to do, but to get him moving and in space, we need to do that. Mitch is never going to be a consistent pocket passer. So even if I have to, in part of his drop back, instead of having him sit in the shotgun and stand there, even if I have to move him a yard or two left or a yard or two right, we have to keep his feet moving, because that's what starts to generate better footwork. That's what generates the concentration. With all of that happening, again, there will be plays, and if we can get these right, you're going to catch Philly quite frequently. That's what I want to see the most. I think that's enough, but I think you guys understand, right? I mean, this is, again, when we talk about building on momentum, there were some positive plays last week. There were things to build off of, as much as I might want to hammer on the negative, and I'll be candid, I'm a very negative Bears fan when it comes to Mitch right now. There were plays to be made, and he made some of them, and that's a step over almost none of them in the earlier times. So that needs to continue. Last but not least, the third key for me, I've been talking for the last couple of weeks about define and create an identity on offense. I think we're still doing that, and I candidly think that that's going to take all season. But I'd also like to see us define ourselves defensively. One of the things we haven't been doing as of late has been finding the quarterback. If anything that shows you how important Akeem Hicks has been how little pass rush we have generated. Khalil Mack, I saw someone go on a Twitter rant that he's taking plays off. You're damn right he is. You know why? He's getting double and tripled every time. He's exhausted. He's the focal point. But every other defensive lineman is letting us down. Nick Williams had this great start. Nick, where you been? Floyd had this amazing start against Green Bay, and we all, or at least so many of us, were like, he's finally going to put together a great season, a complete season. Nope. Leonard Floyd, who are you? Where you been? Aaron Lynch, what are you doing? Bilal, I know you've been, Bilal, you're back. What are you doing? Right? Isaiah Irving, I don't think you should be on this football team. I'm sorry. You got some bend, I know, but come on, guys. What are you doing? This is the time, right, to define who you are. You guys are resting on the laurels of what you did last season. Eddie Jackson, I don't care about your being upset that the fans are booing you. Guess what? Make a play. You got burned for what should have been a touchdown last week. And now you want us to applaud you guys? No, man. Go pick off a pass. Prince, I'm done with you, man. You should have been burned for a touchdown. The only thing that you did right on that play was somewhat get in the guy's way. I don't know where you've been as of late. Kyle Fuller, stay cool, man. You're doing everything. Danny Trevathan, God, we got to re-sign you. You're such a heart. Roquan, you better build off of what you did. But define yourselves. As a defense, you can't run out of a locker room and not talk about it because you're disappointed in the loss and you want to hold it back against the quarterback. Because guess what? Great defenses don't put up what you've done. Great defenses don't let Melvin Gordon, of all people, go through untouched for a 19-yard touchdown. Give me a break. What's helped this defense so much has been misplays by offenses more than they've actually forced misplays. How different is that Minnesota game if Kirk Cousins actually hits Thielen on that first play because Kyle Fuller was playing and trying to hand it off to a safety that's not there, which is a recurring theme all season. It's been, I've noticed, like handoffs, like they're expecting zone coverage. There's no safety help. That's on Eddie. If you guys want to be good, go for it. You're 16th in sacks, right? You're middle of the pack. If you get up 340-yard plays, great. You guys are 32% on third down. That's actually really good. But you're going against a team this week that gives 49% completions or conversions on third down. You want us to treat you like it's still 2018 and you guys are doing all of this. Guess what? It's not, and you're not. You can blame injuries. You could blame whatever was going on with Roquan. You can blame everything, but you guys need to look in the mirror. You guys got to dig deep. You got to find some heart. If the offense isn't doing it and they're not, guess what? You got to do it. Remember when the Bears played an Arizona team and that offense couldn't score a flippin' point? What happened? Defense won that game. Special teams won that game. You can complain all you want, but go win a game. Don't crow about how good you guys are or how good you should be, and don't boo me. Show me. Go win this game. So, I've been rather rant-filled lately, so that's always fun. But as we kind of finish off the keys to this game, right? The key matchups that I'm looking for. It's going to be Fletcher Cox versus Coward. That's a tough matchup, especially for a guy who's new to guard. You know, I think he's got the size and strength to really maul him in the run game, but you got to worry about that quickness. They're probably going to treat this much like they treated the Rams and Aaron Donald last year with some center help. And so that's where you're going to need the agility of Daniels to really play a part. But Coward's going to have to win some one-on-ones against Fletcher, and they're going to put him in situations to test him, and that's got to be a win. I mean, A-Rob versus Maddox, right? If Maddox is back and that's their number one corner, and they're having him shadow A-Rob, that's another matchup he's got to dominate. And last but not least, the one that I'm most excited to watch, Khalil Mack versus Lane Johnson. I mean, that should just be a brutal slugfest. And I'm going to know everything that I need to know by how often we see Mack over there versus against the rookie Andre Dillard. Because candidly, this is a game that you really want Leonard Floyd on that side so he could maybe build some confidence. But you can only do that if Mack is starting to beat up on Lane a little bit. And that's not a great matchup. Nothing against Mack, right? But Lane is just a physical mauler guy, and they're going to send shipping help, and they're going to leave another guy over there. So it's a tough matchup for Khalil. I'm not going to take that away. But as a guy who early on we were all saying was in the MVP talk and definitely Defensive Player of the Year, he's disappeared too much, and that needs to be a win. Last but not least, right, the three key players. They've all come from the last two drafts. You know, I could go on a bit of a rant about the Ryan Pace-led Bears, and we can talk about his good and his bad moves and all of that. But this is a game that's going to come down to David Montgomery, Anthony Miller, and Roquan Smith being everything that we drafted them to be. And so that's why those are my three key players. You know, Montgomery looked really good last week. He ran physical. He ran strong. He made things that weren't always there. His punishing style fits us a lot better. And so we just need to see that happen. And I just want to see some more chunk plays. You know, everybody gets upset about that 55-yarder that he couldn't turn into a touchdown. You know what? Hit me. I'll take that all day. Hit me with 20 yards or 10 yarders, 15 yarders. Chunk plays in the run game kill defenses. And so, with a commitment to the run, with the I formation, I want to see 3 carries greater than 15 yards on each of those carries out of Montgomery this week. Anthony Miller, I thought he made some big steps. And look, there's been nobody more frustrated with Mitch's play than Anthony Miller. The dude is getting open. The dude is working. And I know there's been reports about he just doesn't work as hard as A-Rob. But you know what? The guy is getting frustrated, and we've got to figure it out. And he's still working hard. They just want him to work harder. Last week we saw what happened. He's the most dynamic guy with the ball in his hands. We need to get it to him in space. This is a week where he should stand out. And this is a week where Mitch has to find him. And last but not least, Roquan, how good this defense is. When we talk about define yourself defensively, Khalil Mack is the best player. But nobody can change the game more than Roquan for us because he is every down in the pass game and the run game. We haven't seen a ton out of him blitzing this year. This is a game where I want to see a sack and a turnover from him, either through a forced fumble or an interception. You had this great game against Green Bay. You kind of tapered off. You went way bad when you came back, and you came up extremely good this last week. You have to build on that and make something happen. So that's it. This week's Cars Keys is back to a more normal keys with a little bit of rant power inside of it. As always, guys, I really enjoy the interactions on Twitter. It's always a blast to sit down and talk and usually mock other things, but really love the Twitter conversations. As always, hit me up on Twitter at CarsKeys1, but otherwise, we'll talk throughout the week. Thanks, everybody.